My name is Chris Hampson. I'm the chair of London RIBA, work in London and been involved with the RIBA for 8 years and a very long time as a member. I'm not going to tell you how long that is. So we have 3 candidates. We've obviously in challenging times. It's not quite certain yet, but fairly certain, I think. We've left Europe, or we're leaving Europe. The people at the top are resigning, and the terrible thing about it, it was to Iceland. I think the same thing has happened last Friday, and that's certainly ongoing, and it changes on a daily basis. I think there are some issues to do with leaving Europe in relation to the RIBA moving forward over the next 2 months, 2 years, 10 years, don't know. So challenging times. I think it's interesting to see that we've nearly got all 10,600 members here from London. I haven't quite counted it yet. Have you, Owen? No. I think that the sort of issues to do with the Brexit are staff, VAT, education, outward in finance, inward finance, as architects in this country working on European projects. So not quite sure how that's all going to work. We are at the 6th husting, and I think 1 to go, is that right, in Edinburgh? I think the last thing is good luck to the candidates. There are a few rules which I'm going to try and impose, which are: don't go beyond your 5 minutes, get to the point, answer the questions. I think it would be true to say that over the course of the last 4 weeks, we're absolutely sick to the back teeth of trying to listen to people telling us how it is, guessing, flanneling, fabricating, and not actually getting the proper answers. And it would just be nice to be transparent and straightforward. I think the same goes for the questions from the floor. I've done this before, and I do seem to remember at 8 o'clock when we were finishing, the last time I did it, somebody had a 10-minute monologue and still hadn't asked the question. And when I stopped that person, there were daggers. So can we just avoid that and think about your question? Get to the point on your question. Because actually, unless you get to your point on your question, say, I'd like you to answer this question, you're not going to get the proper answer from the candidate. So, that's it for now. The first candidate is, now I've got him listed as Benjamin Derbyshire, and I'm not sure whether to be called Benjamin or Ben. Okay, Ben Derbyshire.
Okay, thank you. I gather this image from my Future RIBA website has caused some concern in the corridors of the RIBA. But don't worry, it may not be necessary to storm the Bastille if we put architects back at the heart of the RIBA. So here's my simple thesis in 5 minutes. Architects have very considerable problems, as we all know. They do great work, but only after an education that takes 10 years and costs £100,000 worth of debt. The mid-range salary for a mid-career architect is about £40,000, compares very badly with other professions and with industry at large. The book I illustrate here by the Susskind's points out that technological and societal changes mean that we have very substantial challenges for the future. Competition is fierce, our influence has declined, and the turnout at these hustings, I think, demonstrates, and this is perfectly typical of the 6 that we've been at already, architects feel abandoned by their institute. Meanwhile, the RIBA itself has some pretty significant problems too. The other side of the same coin I've just mentioned is that it is at rock bottom credibility. Until recently, with its new chief executive and executive team. I think it's been very poorly run, with some extremely dubious financial decisions. It has an aging membership. It has decreasing diversity despite its best endeavours. It is infamously London-centric and inward-looking, and it's much too concerned with the protection of a brand in a rather old-fashioned way, I would argue. The solution, in my view, is the membership. It's architects, and this is an image from Manchester Architects, and it shows them at one of the events that they curate. They get together in their local market, they collaborate with other professionals and with their clients and with their local authority, and they produce an extremely interesting and engaging edifice that is the way in the future that I think the RIBA should promote architecture through what its members are doing. So it should ensure that it champions architects wherever they are, however they practice. It should provide them with tools for success. I'm thinking in terms of a franchise based on the Manchester Architects model. We should drive promotion of the research and the debate that we all do in practice, so that local architects, wherever they are, become the voice of the profession. And I think if we do that, we'll find we have a much larger, much younger, and much more diverse membership. In order to achieve that, the RIBA itself needs to change a lot. It needs to replace this bunker mentality from which it suffers with a very outgoing and giving with an open hand, open source confidence. It needs to be much, much, much more collaborative, and right now with Brexit, I would say a cross-industry response is the only response to the challenges that we face. It needs to be devolved rather than centrist and corporate in the way that I've just described, and it needs that single-minded focus on driving engagement. It needs to champion architects wherever they are. Again, these images are my attempt on the website, and I do hope you'll visit it, to portray how the Institute of the Future, Future RIBA, will appear to its members in various different categories. And in those different categories, the RIBA will be championing a much slimmer, faster, and therefore richer organisation. It will need to be more open, more transparent, much more diverse. It will become younger and more relevant, collaborative and more knowledgeable, more innovative, and more diverse in every possible way. Why do I believe I can do it? I've always been a practicing architect, and I've built with others a successful, and one of whom is here, a successful, so credit where credit's due, Simons. We have built a successful business over very many years. We've survived 3 recessions. If there's another one, I'm completely confident that we'll survive that one too. I've been around the RIBA for slightly more than 2 years, so I've come to understand how it thinks, but I'm not an insider and I don't have a vested interest at all in some of the decisions which I think it'll have to undo in order to become solvent and successful. I've never been employed by an institution other than one of my own making, and I may be a little bit grey-haired, but I'm nonetheless enthusiastic for that. I include this slide just because there's been some skepticism, for some reason or other, as to my commitment to diversity in the course of this campaign. I'm not going to go into the detail of it, but I just leave you to read what it says and dispense with that problem. I have actually delivered for another membership organisation the proposition that I'm putting to you now. By engaging the membership of the Housing Forum, we created for that membership a much more interesting and worthwhile offer. They became the source of the output that we produced, and because of that they enjoyed and found much more value in their membership, as a consequence of which we almost doubled the number of members of the Housing Forum, and we transformed the financial success of the organisation in the process. Hunt Thompson Associates was 5 people when I joined it in 1969. It's now 150 people, is been through a number of name changes, as you can see. It's 150 strong. It has offices in London, Edinburgh, Manchester, and it has projects all over the UK and sometimes, from time to time, overseas too. So there it is. That's my 5 minutes. And my central proposition is that if you are looking for a candidate who is capable of leading the organization to put architects back at the heart of the RIBA, I'm your man. Thank you very much indeed.
Yeah? Go. Thank you. Hello. Good evening. Thank you for coming. I'm Alan Jones. I'm from Northern Ireland. You can tell from my accent. I was the past president of the Royal Society of Ulster Architects, but I have been in London for over 10 years working with Michael Hopkins and with David Morley. I've then went back and I've run my own practice. I currently also teach. I'm a design expert for the government in Northern Ireland. I'm the current VP, Vice President of Education here at the RIBA. I sit on council. I was nationally elected last year, and I'm being VP, I'm also on the RIBA board. So that's since September. I've been there and working with Jane and the other 15 members on the board, making the changes that have started to come through in the press in terms of the development and working with the senior members of the RIBA staff. You can look at my website and you look at and see my nominators and you can see what they think. I have strong support from London. I've currently 43% of my nominators are from London. I think that's proportional and representative, including, you'll see some names there that you'll recognize. So I have sort of good, that's not all. There are lots of others that you can look at on my website. The major issues, which I hope we will talk about tonight, include that, yes, I have been saying that RIBA is in crisis, but I think it's more to do with its relevance in terms of, I believe it needs to be more focused, it needs to be more nimble, and it needs to be more relevant. The support across the nations and branches and the regions and so on is important, i.e. the relationship between here and outside of here. The erosion of our role as architects, and the reduction in fees while running costs. To a certain extent, you mightn't believe it, but London is the architectural wonderland compared to the regions, particularly. The procurement has become much more complex. It disadvantages small, young practices as much as the sort of larger practices. Graduates, we've heard Ben talk about the debt and being underpaid. The average age of a member of the RIBA is in the late 50s. I think a KPI for the next president should be moving that into the 40s or even into the 30s. The unruliness of ARB, particularly in how it focuses on the performance of sole practitioners and small-scale practitioners. The closer relationship that I think is essential for the future of RIBA and its members in terms of practice in schools of architecture. And when I refer to diversity and being inclusive, I refer to that of the members and what architects do. This is a diagram looking at a post-recession world. In the middle, I can't point with my finger because it's way up there. There's an ice cap, which you would call pre-recession practice. And what we have to try and do is help practitioners and members move from that very precarious position where you just do the same and you haven't changed, to the new world, new practice as it's referred to. I'm coining a new phrase, which is what is called the extended profession. Because when you look at these outer lands, top left and along the bottom, membership will tell you 1/3 of members are in those lands, which are to do with the media, they're to do with sitting on the client side rather than sitting within practice, teaching, researching, government, planning, technical developments and so on. They're there. That's not to say that we stop focusing on the middle, but it's how do we create this sort of bigger tent idea of all our members together working to help each other. My way of doing that so far is creating a role model project, 75 graduates working with 200 students to understand the position of what people do, that resource doesn't exist. And I think REBA itself has to try and understand what members do and what the trends are in terms of how that's developing. In terms of diversity, I refer to, as I say, it's to do with representation. As I say, I mentioned that I've got 43% support in London, but I also made a positive attempt at also having support internationally, which is one of the main key areas where REBA thinks it should be becoming much more inclusive, but also the regions. Because one might argue being a branch in London and its relationship with REBA is the same as being a branch and a region elsewhere. We have a short memory. I've been tweeting about Frank Duffy, for example, and what he talked about how the profession should change and not just be about star architecture and so on. And we have to actually widen that through, say, for example, the education process and so on. What Stephen Hodder has been doing, I think, is excellent. We need to be looking at such books like, for example, How to Be a Happy Architect. I don't know how many of you in the room know that one. Maybe you'll go out and buy it immediately, although it's out of print. In eBay. Sorry. It is about the new strategy, which has just been emailed. It was agreed at Council yesterday, and it's now been emailed. It's about a global profession driving excellence in architecture, serving members, etc. And in terms of being global, I have been traveling the world in terms of validating schools of architecture. I've been doing training events. In terms of excellence, I refer to my own work in terms of the number of awards and the publishing that I've done, and also my supporters. So there you go. I leave you the last 20 seconds to look at the support I have in London. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Andrew Salter. I was the Vice President of Membership, Chairman of Nations Regions for 2 years, probably about 9 or 10 years ago now. After that, I was 2 terms of 4 years in total as RIBA Honorary Secretary. Completed those roles after that term of 6 years on the board in about 3 years ago. The time we have now is very similar to 2008 when we had a crash then. Iceland came up at that period as well. It seems they must be tagging us in terms of the economy. There's some ironies there somewhere. But the situation is obviously difficult at this current time. I know the RIBA well. I know what we do, and we do a lot of things. We have vice presidents in all the major areas that you'd expect a professional institute to have. We do a lot of research. We have a lot of interest groups. We have a lot of committee members with discussing issues particular to their interests, and they've done a lot of very, very good work. My concern is that sometimes a lot of that work is not taken out beyond or not seen to be not seen to land in the laps of our practitioners and our members. My main concern with the Institute is one of connection, and I'd like to increase that connection. That what we really need is to connect with our members through with tech, on iPads, on your breakfast table, on your laptops. Unless we can directly connect with all our members around the world, then we become increasingly irrelevant. That we must maintain that relevance, not only by the brilliant work that we do as members, connected members, but that is disseminated to each and every member in the most direct ways possible. These days, I'm connected on. I use Facebook, but I have the RSA. I'm a fellow of the RSA, and you have feeds up from them coming on about lectures and various talks, various issues, and they're asking for a comment, and they're giving you information. I'm also obviously a friend of on those terms with the RIBA. I don't see those connections. I do not see that information. So we're missing tricks there. I understand that obviously we have fun with computers in this organisation, as a number of organisations do, that they have difficulties. But we do need to build our platforms so that we can communicate directly, because if we're going to be global, the one thing we've got to do is get our message across to all those people around the world of what we do. We do a lot, but we just don't get it out there. And that is my main concern. I also am a person that, obviously because I've been chair of Nations and Regions, that I care about the regions. And that's all around the world, all our regions. And we need to be able to have that platform. People these days are not as clubbable in the same way as they used to be, that people just won't go out on a wet Wednesday to a meeting when they'd rather do other things. They're very, very busy, and but they still want the connection, and they want that on the laptop at home. They would like to be able to, or in the office. They want to watch and they want to receive information. They also want to be listened to, and I don't think we do that enough either. So we need to be able to engage in a two-way process to affect our policies, and if we are relevant in that way, then we will get the increased connection that we desire, that improves general attendance at events. But I'm not going to hold my breath in terms of massive numbers at these events. They'd rather watch it on the video stream. That is what I think we ought to be increasing. It's that sort of work. We do fantastic work in, for instance, international. And there are lots of discussions. We go out to, we've got UIA connections and various other things. All around the world we have a lot of good discussions and debates. We need to bring those to individuals, to the members, and so we need to use all means. So I think that's really all I need to say. Thank you.
Right, it's question time. So I'm going to kick off with a fairly straightforward question. Really going back to, I think, something they called Brexit. And here we are at Brexit. And what, in turn, and I'm going to go over to Ben first, what do you think the challenging issues are, the really challenging issues are likely to be for the RIBA in the next year or two if we leave the EU?
I assume we are. Oh, right. Okay. I assume we are going to be leaving the EU. That's what we, as a nation, voted for. So I think we need to front up and get our heads around that. I think the RIBA is no exception, and I was greatly encouraged by the mood at Council yesterday, because actually inspired by its younger members. Thank you very much indeed, student reps. So I think the mood is for change, and I think the RIBA needs to become a much more member-focused organisation than it has been hitherto. The reason for that is because the only game in town so far as its future, its solvency and its robust economic health is increasing its membership. And quite apart from the ability of its members as architects to promote and deliver its purpose of advancing architecture, its economic health and viability derive entirely from that central proposition, in my view. So, as I say, and I said, I hope not with too many distracting images. I think architects are quite capable of coping with imagery, if I may say so, Chair. And I think it's quite important to put images to your proposition. With that imagery, I'm trying to convey a much more immediate and a much more engaging institute than hitherto.
Sorry, it wasn't a personal slight there, Ben, because there were two people. So, anyway.
Thank you very much. To answer your question, what the challenges are likely to be for REBA when we leave, to me, the first thing is helping the members and helping the chartered practices understand the implications and supporting them, giving them advice. One of the major issues, obviously, will be the impact on people. The biggest resource that we have in our practices are the people who work with us. There has been good guidance given out already by REBA. We've actually got the AIA asking if they can actually use that guidance and give it to their members who are in the UK. I think there is a potential, obviously, financial and economic impact on practices. That potentially has an impact on the number of members that we have. And that's the revenue then for REBA. So we have to, I think, as I was saying in my presentation about how we make sure that we are relevant. Why would you know, if your turnover is going down, why would you think that you should still be a member of REBA? So there's that. I think REBA, the challenge is also avoiding what I call the Robert Peston effect. That we remember back that Robert Peston actually, or some accuse him of actually talking up the problem. So whilst we have to be realistic and help our members and chartered practices understand what the issues are and support them, the other point is also looking at what potential positives could come out of it. I can see, for example, potential positives in terms of architectural education. We're no longer driven by what Europe would want. We can actually then start to define, as the RIBA, what we think our graduates should be, our students should be studying and working on, and the graduates, what qualities they should have. There is also, I think, a good point that was made in council yesterday, which is there is another network that we can consider looking at, which is the Commonwealth, which is much bigger than the EU. It is global. But it also allows us to negotiate much stronger with the likes of the USA, Australia, Canada, etc. So it's being realistic, being supportive, and seeing where the positives are. I think those are what the challenges are for REBA.
I think the problems for the RIBA are similar to the last recession. In terms of economic activity, our commercial revenue streams will be hit. Enterprises will be hit. Our venues operations may well be hit as people try to consider where they're spending their next pound. So we will have to be more innovative to overcome any problems and dips in those places. We will need to know what our core values are, what our core activities are, and ensure that they're secure. We also need to, again, we did this in 2008 with hardship, with our hardship fees, etc., our lower fees for members, and that allowed us to maintain our connection with our membership. And it's crucial to maintain connection with your members, because if you can do that at a lower rate, at least they're there for you. And when better times are there, then they can go back to the standard rate again. If you lose connection completely, then it's unlikely they're going to return, or could not return, or may not return. So you need a bigger cell to get those back. So I can see it will hit the income stream for REBA. I also believe, however, that we have to be there for our members. So we have to concentrate activities to support our members and make sure that they have all the marketing guidance that they can have, that we understand that we can give them all the market intelligence, show them where other areas are useful to go into, and help them in those areas. We need to ensure that we are there for them. When you are a member of the AA, you don't stop being a member of the AA when you have an older car. That's when you need the AA most, and that's what we need to be there. We need to be there for the members.
Okay, thank you.
Can Can I just mention quickly, we are filming and the questions are going to be put on the web as well. So if anyone's not happy for that to go online, just can you say now? Everyone's happy? Great, thanks.
Good evening. I'm Richard Lorch. I'm an architect. I edited a research journal, and I'm a member of The Edge, which is a cross-disciplinary group of construction professionals. My question is for all three candidates. It's in two parts. I won't do any grandstanding. I'll just cut to the question. How should architect services and skills to clients and society change? And what will you do to carry this forward at the RIBA if you think their change is needed? Okay. How should architect skills and services to clients and society change? Are we doing everything right? Is everything, all our skills and all our services bang on? Or do we actually need to rethink some of that? That's sort of the question.
Can we
To answer your question, well, first of all, I would refer the audience to Stephen Hodder's good work that he's been doing in RIBA with regards to the relationship between architects and clients. And again, if you read that document, it actually explains what we are doing well as a profession and as an organisation, but also what we're not doing well. My point would be that I think both RIBA, and I would also argue that to a certain extent, schools of architecture are interested in product and they are not interested in process. So I think we have to encourage both our up-and-coming architects, but also our practices to become more interested in. I'm not saying that we aren't. I think we need to become more interested. And in that engagement, then you, through briefing, through actually the development, through the soft landings process and so on, it's about actually bringing people along. And I know that takes extra time and so on to do that, but you have then the potential to actually get further in the project. You have I think I argued with Tony Chapman, I know he's no longer head of awards. I made the argument, which I think is the same in the States, that actually you don't submit a project for an award until 2 or 3 years after it's finished. So in terms of that, would it actually help that relationship? Maybe we should have greater or bigger client statements when it comes to awards and so on as well. So it's encouraging a greater development of the relationship between the client and the architect. And what we need the evidence, and I think the work that's going on at the minute in terms of the encouraging clients to give feedback through the RIBA website is fantastic, but RIBA does have a bit of a reputation for only taking things so far. And it's what we do with that information when we get it, how we feed it back into, for example, the review of architectural education is important, how that then is, but also then into the profession.
Alan, do you want the question again, or are you okay?
Yeah, it's what I'd say is really that our service evolves throughout our professional life, and it will evolve. It isn't just about traditional practice, that we have specialisms that we can go into. We develop as people, we develop as professionals and as practices, and we go in various routes. We steer into various veins of work and veins of client base, as it were. We should be a very flexible profession. We should be very innovative. Our services we will provide the services that are related to the built environment, or we could be a client body. I don't see it just as a fixed point of service in the traditional sense of the word of the straight job book description. We should be looking at at various areas where we have particular expertise to feed into the client. We could be part of a large team. We could be the leader of a main team. We could be in various. We take on various roles, and I don't think it is just just a traditional role that a lot of architects still do. We do, but we also have expertise in particular areas, and our client base has changed over time in various areas. We have to be flexible, and we have to be intelligent about providing service all the time.
Sorry, I think the one part of the question that's not being answered is how are we going to actually do that, though? How's the RIB actually going to do this?
Sure. Very simply, that we provide lifelong learning in the RIBA. We promote opportunity, we promote support, and the member with knowledge, information, background, research to help them increase their capability to fulfill the new roles that they're considering. And the RIBA can also be putting forward new roles. When you look at green issues coming up, when you look at BIM, when you look at all these different areas that we've, and client design advisor, all these different areas and conservation, they've all been promoted by the RIBA. They've come out of workshops and work groups and have been developed. Procurement has been a big one of pushing governments to have intelligent procurement, and we should be pushing not pushing, but we should be encouraging people to take focus in various parts of the professional agenda to ensure that we support the client.
So yes, I'm a fervent advocate that in the information age, we need to do something in order to earn our status as professionals, such that we are valued by society, and when we're valued by society, I think we'll find ourselves in a better position and with better remuneration. So that's the core proposition that I put. Obviously, the Susskind book is an extremely good evocation of the societal changes that the information age is bringing to our marketplace, such that people can obtain all kinds of services and information through other routes and often for free. And of course it also postulates that the advance of artificial intelligence is something that we must engage with as practices in order to deliver. How does the RIBA do anything about that? I'm a great believer in these local networks, and I'm a great believer in collaboration. So in my view, practices large and small can and do work together, and the best place for them to work together is in their local marketplaces, which is why I put forward this idea that we can foster local networks, not just of architects, crucially, but of our professional collaborators, our clients and legislators in local markets, from Bombay to Birmingham, by the way. And by so doing, I think what we will do as an institute, if we communicate and promote it, is present to the public and to our clients a much more attractive edifice of architects delivering our objective, advancing architecture in the built environment. In my own practice, we have a bit of a mantra. We say we need to be curious, we need to research, we need to be creative, we need to be collaborative, and we need to be communicative. All of those three, I like these alliterative propositions. I think the architects like nothing more than getting together with each other and with their collaborators and coming up with propositions which I think we should be helping them to promote into our marketplace.
Mr. Gloucester.
Good evening, David Gloucester, Director of Education at the RIBA. As I'm older than almost everybody here, I think I can ask this question. Oldest wasp in the room. So, given that, with the greatest respect, none of you in the first flush of youth, and that we are a professional membership body, therefore dependent on the support of our members for the future relevance and sustainability of the RIBA. If one were to set an ambitious KPI of getting the average age of our member down from the late 50s to the late 30s in 15 years, how might you go about doing this?
As I said earlier, it's really with connection. We've got to make sure that we are relevant to the young. We've got to bring in students. We've got to have more connection with the student population within the heart of the RIBA. We've got to have more representation on council. We've got to ensure that we actually communicate with them in the way that they communicate with the rest of the world. That it's not just how can I put it, the older clubbable people. That it's a much more direct, a much more directly connected way that they work. They are always connected to all their people, all their friends, all around the world, and they exchange ideas minute by minute, and they're doing that all the time. We need to be there as part of that, rather than waiting for a committee or whatever group of coming together. We should be evolving, we should be communicating that as a constant, and then we will become relevant to them. I always, as you are saying, you are the age you are, then we can remember when Archigram were around in the 60s and how dynamic that was for us, and how we enjoyed Ron Heron's illustrations, etc. And that was a very exciting time, and it actually stimulated people like Richard Rogers and Pompidou. So it's very important that we engage them, and there are some elderly councillors now at the RIBA who were the salaried architects group, young people in their 20s who were dynamic, worked for the GLC and got involved in the RIBA and banged the desks and started to stir up the old boys. We want that to happen. That should happen, and we must connect with them in the way, with the media that they have, to make that happen. We need to do that because for the relevance, and if we don't do it, we will wither away and die.
Okay. So I'm always rather amused by the proposition that student members of the RIBA pay nothing and get nothing. And so I find appealing that the idea that they should pay a little and get a lot. So I think the value of membership needs to be hugely increased, especially for young and aspiring architects. So how do we do that? Well, I think we make it a more attractive membership by enfranchising students in the voting for the institute. Some people also believe that students should be able to run for senior office in the organization. We should hugely diversify routes to qualification, David, with earn as you learn possibilities that make it much more affordable for young people to become architects and ultimately fully fledged RIBA members. I think the RIBA and RIBA enterprises should have a loss leading approach to that. I think there should be substantial discounts, not just for students, but for small and impecunious practices. And I think large practices like mine should bear a more substantial proportion of the cost of membership. I think that would help immensely. And I do think a range of measures which are all about proactively enabling and making it better and more fruitful for young people to engage with the profession, which might include extensions of the mentoring scheme currently being promoted. For example, it might include ways in which large practices and small ones might engage in procurement and so on and so forth. I think there's a wealth of opportunity which can and should be taken, in other words, in order to make it a more worthwhile proposition for young people to join the profession.
The first thing I would suggest is actually talk to the students and to early career architects to actually find out what motivates them. Yes, so until you actually know what motivates people, it's very hard to actually provide something that's relevant. So it's only through that consultation process. One of my tutors used to talk about what you would call enlightened self-interest. People are usually motivated by things that help them do things. So you would argue, does it help them get jobs? Does it help them progress through an organization? Does it help them with their career? So I would, first of all, I think what we have to do is actually sort of look around at what, and we're starting to do that since September, is to, like I've been showing, here's what the Royal Society of Chemistry does for their students. Here's the membership program. There's a little bit of money involved. I know that's not necessarily what we should be doing, and the discussion that happened in council yesterday afternoon. But if we even take something like CPD, the CPD that you need as a graduate and as an early career architect is different. And it might be about how to work in a team. It might be how to actually sort of have, it's not to fill gaps within the education system, but there are things as you move and get older. I remember, again, what is a young architect? 40 under 40? Remember the exhibition? 40 is still considered young. And your point about actually trying to make it, an average age of that. I think there is an issue, I think, of the amount that RIBA gives away for free. We need to actually sort of look at the value of what we actually give and whether we move that behind what I call the membership firewall that we're in. And again, that can then become part of what we give to students as part of the offer. I think, again, we have to realize that students and graduates and early career architects, I think, are more political than one might argue the older members, and we have to sort of understand what motivates them in those terms as well. But I think I would actually broaden it and sort of say, I think one of the fundamental problems with RIBA is that people get involved in committees and so on, and you go and you make resolutions and so on, but you find it just sort of fizzles out. It doesn't go anywhere. So we've been talking there about, say, for example, more student representation on council, having parallel student council, for example, which could be virtual. It doesn't take a lot of resources to do that, but it's actually how that is then woven into how RIBA changes, I think, is very, very important. So when people see what they have said and how they have then, what that impact has been, is very, very important. And that, I think, is when you start to see younger people being more involved.
Thank you. Thank you. I think a general point is that I think it's very easy to talk about it all and exactly to make lots of loud noises at the RIBA, but actually pushing things forward and getting them done is the hard job. And I think that's the mantle, particularly at the moment, that any of you have to see if you can push things forward for the benefit of the RIBA and members. John.
Let me declare immediately that I'm one of Ben Derbyshire's supporters, one of about 150. And I also know Andrew Salter very well. I've known him for much longer than Ben. I've also been an elected member of ARB. And Alan Jones made a statement in his manifesto that I want him to substantiate. And let me just tell you what he says. And having sat on ARB for 4 years, I think if he can't substantiate the comment, he should withdraw it and apologise. He asserts the unruliness of ARB and how they target smaller practices is a reason why we should vote for him. Well, let me tell you that ARB, like the RIBA, has a disciplinary process, and you have to be reported before the process commences. Very few people are reported every year. The numbers are tiny. It just so happens that many of the people that are clients that report architects are domestic clients, and they use this as a mechanism to stop paying their fees. So for you to assert in this rather cynical way, and a rather divisive way, appealing for the votes of small firms, that somehow ARB targets smaller practices, for me, if you don't have the evidence, is a disgraceful assertion.
I think that's a question for you, Ellen, actually.
Can we all have a go at answering? John, do you agree that we should all have a go at answering that? Yeah. The evidence is the discussions I've had with various practices. The point, and again, it's something that's been discussed within the RIBA as well, is that I think the issue for small practices and sole practitioners is that larger clients working with larger firms have a different way of addressing their issues, and that's usually through the legal process. For smaller practitioners, they get often, as I understand it from what I've been told, is that they are often held to ransom with the threat to go to ARB. There's also, when you, the issues to do with the impact of what that does to a small practitioner as well is a real sort of issue. So when I sort of say that what I see the RIBA trying to do is to help the small practitioner, first of all, stay out of trouble, and to be better at what they do in terms of managing risk, and also with the view to giving them some guidance and support when it comes to the dealings with ARB. It's not to, it is for the small practitioner. It is, and the amount of the depth at which ARB go into when they start that process, that it almost becomes a sort of a process of the files all of a sudden are, as I understand it from people who've been involved in the process, it's as if once you start to open the files, it's not just addressing that one point that has, but if other things appear during the process, those then become issues that can be considered through the process. So it's, I think it is just the attention when I say target, it's the fact that what I would like to see is how ARB address or encourage large-scale clients to come forward as well. My wife is a dentist, and the equivalent of ARB in the dentistry world puts ads in the Sunday Times to actually go chasing for and make themselves readily available and so on for what they do. I think it is unfortunate that it is, as you admit, that it is the domestic client that uses the ARB process, and that's what I would like to try and sort of discuss with ARB, is how that sort of unevenness can be addressed.
I think it's incredibly important that we should open ourselves up to be held to account as professionals. If we purport to have so-called professional status, then we definitely need a robust and thoroughgoing appraisal of that, and we need fair and transparent processes when we transgress. I regret very much that this current system is rather confusing, and I'm sorry about the endless delays in the resolution of the distinction between the RIBA's idea of such scrutiny and that of ARB. In my dreams, they would be simplified and amalgamated, and the job would fall to one or the other, John. And on my website, I purport a much more open source proposition, which would be something a bit like iEscape. It would be moderated by the RIBA, and clients would be encouraged to feedback through it on their experience of the service that we deliver. So it wouldn't just be, when architects get it wrong. It would be how well they get it right.
All I would say really is I would agree with John in as much as that the profession in general is, they has these as rare examples that we're a good profession. When you compare other professions in terms of actions by their professional bodies, we do all right. And I would also say that, ARB does have on its board architects like John looking after the affairs of architects, regulating the profession, and they have a considerable input. And the same with the RIBA. We have very dedicated members on the disciplinary panel. We have very good guidance, and even to the point of telling you in appendices of exactly of mentoring or of support that you can have, because it is difficult when you come up against these things, and members need support at a sort of personal level. And I think that the systems are in place to regulate the profession, and I think in general they do it well. It is unfortunate that in some areas of our profession, in the small practices, when time is tight, and with very small practices, they just don't have possibly as robust a system in place to help them in certain areas. But then there are, in very, very small jobs, tolerances are very tight, contingencies are very tight, and it is a very difficult time. And the same with the economy. When things are on the up, people aren't as concerned. They're making money. On the downturn, they change in that regard, as a profession and practice advised practices in the last downturn, and those things, we have to guard. We have careful guidance for practices and practitioners, and that we are generally pretty well, a pretty reasonable profession, I think.
Sorry, I think you're next one.
Hello, I'm Shahriar Nasser, Belsize Architects. My question, can you hear me? Do I need this?
You have to.
Yeah. My question is that in relation to small practices and how as the president you could actually help the smaller practices. There's been quite a lot of discussion. There have been some movements towards helping smaller practices, how they can be actually more engaged with work, with better work, to be able to produce better stuff rather than remaining as small ones that they do only house extensions or refurbishment. And I think there is quite a serious problem, because there are quite a number of people, architects, as working in small practice or have their own small practice. And I think the number is large, but they don't have any voice. And more they're becoming irrelevant, and larger practices getting the more interesting projects. The smaller practice cannot compete. And I think it's for the RIBA to help change that. And I just wonder how you might be able to do that.
Okay, so the question is, how can the RIBA help small practices? Yeah? I think it's you, Ben, this time, isn't it? I'm probably wrong, but...
So, Sharia, as you'll have gathered, I have this enthusiasm for the idea of local networks of practice and their collaborators. And I think it's clear that where we see that working, and examples are Manchester architects, but actually we see also, for example, New London architecture here in London. There are various places where I see practices of all size, people presenting and promoting the interesting things that they're doing and their contribution to improving the quality of and sustainability of the built environment. I see it a lot where people are able to come together in local networks, in their local marketplace, and present what I call this interesting and engaging edifice of architectural endeavor. My central proposition is that if we are to help small practices, what the RIBA needs to do is roll out that model across its entire membership. And I used in early versions of my campaign a phrase which I've now dropped because I gather it was used by Chairman Mao, but it actually is quite descriptive, letting 1,000 flowers bloom. And the proposition, therefore, is that the RIBA will succeed in its purpose of advancing architecture if it can enable the multiplying effect of thousands and thousands and thousands of people doing it in different ways, in different markets, and in different forms of practice. And I think that, richly presented by the RIBA in its shop window, as we did, in my view, in our small way at the Housing Forum, would be transformative for those practices and for the Institute as a whole.
I'll show you this diagram. Apologies for the camera, you mightn't be able to see it. Currently there's a sort of dumbbell effect that's happening with practice. It's being very difficult. Medium-scale practices are finding it very hard to actually exist. An example of that is Malcolm Fraser in Edinburgh having to join. So we have a polarizing profession. It was actually predicted by Building Futures in 2012. So you have over 50% of the members of the RIBA working in practices with less than 10 employees. So it is a substantial amount of the membership. To me, there are examples of how we support and should be doing more. Guerrilla tactics, for example, that's great if you're in London or you can afford to come down to London for that. The guerrilla tactics for November is actually going to be on new forms of business models for small practices, which I think is an excellent idea. One of the slides that I showed in my presentation showed a book cover by a gentleman called Cliff Moser, which is looking at post-recession. And even that globe is about post-recession. And it's helping, again, what recessions very often do is large practices will shed staff, and those staff very often end up starting up on their own. And it's how they are supported. Cliff Moser's book, for example, talks about different forms of business. It talks about architects actually thinking themselves as problem solvers rather than just purely designers, but finding solutions. Again, finding small practices role models. I've thought about how we should be able to, architecture at the end of the day is competitive, and you are chasing similar work and so on. So maybe it is about actually finding ways of role models in, I don't know, let's say that are relevant. So, for example, Norfolk talking to the Southwest, or Scotland talking to Northern Ireland, but so you can feel that you can share without it damaging your business. The other one is actually to help, maybe REBA should become some form of agency where it can help or show other. Another role model is Acanthus, which probably Andrew would be talking about, which is where small practices join together to pitch for larger work. But I think the final thing that I would say is actually to talk to government about their procurement systems and how they are impacting on small businesses. We've done this in Northern Ireland where we sort of pulled down the curtains, invited in the head of the Central Procurement Directorate, turned off the recorders and so on, with the view to actually saying, look, do you realise where you create all these framework arrangements and so on, that all these small practices don't get a look in? And you're killing the profession. So, and we didn't realise that. And they go off and they try and see what they can do. So they can start to see, well, actually, maybe under a certain value of project, under 2 million, the 3 classroom extension, that sort of thing, maybe we go back to a procurement system that allows small practices to pitch for the work. That would be what I would suggest.
Thank you. You could not currently have a better president than Jane Duncan, who has been championing and campaigning for small practitioners through her guerrilla tactics over the last 10 years and has done a fantastic job. I would obviously want to continue that championing with similar people in the RIBA to continue that good work, and she has done a great job there. In terms of how we did it in the late 1980s, when we had the recession then, 14 like-minded practices throughout Great Britain came together as the Acanthus group of practices, of architectural practices, and as a network worked together and shared a common understanding, and they shared their problems and also their knowledge, and they were very generous to each other with a sense of camaraderie, and they worked out different systems. We had special interest groups in housing, computers at that time, conservation, planning, etc. And that level of support, mutual support, is very useful to small practitioners. There are in Acanthus that all those practices grew, became very successful, and are still together. Very few have gone on their own away from the group. Most have stayed together. And so that sharing of knowledge is very useful. The other way is to specialize so that small practitioners don't just define themselves by how building in some way, but also by becoming a specialist. I worked in the 80s with a lighting consultant, and he worked all around the world, and I was doing the architecture side, and he was a lighting consultant. And he said of another very good architect from out of the research BRE. He said the guy said, specialize, have not only be a generalist but also be a specialist, and in that way you can cover two places. That is being innovative in those ways that will help you in tough times.
Right, so we're going to have to wind up. We actually have 4 more questions, so I'm going to do this slightly differently. Your question mustn't last more than about 20 seconds, and we want almost one-word answers, so try and keep it simple. I don't think any of them can give you one-word answers, but they're going to try.
It's not my fault they've taken so long with all their answers. So I'm Eleanor Tsalakis, and I'm a practicing architect, and I'm also the ambassador for culture at the RIBA. Now, because it's an area that I've been looking at a lot over the last 6 years for the RIBA, I wanted to ask, putting the finances of the Institute aside, what do you think, and this is for the 3 of you, is the best way to promote architecture? Not just to the public, and in doing that to the public, to raise their awareness of what we do so that they can hire us and demand better and good design. but also to us as well, the profession, in doing so to raise our membership numbers. And thirdly, part of the question is, how does the assets that we have, that being 66 Portland Place, recently Liverpool, and our pretty amazing collections fit into that answer?
So how do we most easily promote architecture, and what assets do we have that we can use to do that? Ben?
One word? People. So I don't think it's about premises. I've got to say, RIBA staffers, this is so lavish. And we practitioners in London would give our eye teeth for spaces of this volume and population. It's pretty terrific. I don't think it's about premises. I don't think it's about 76 Portland Place. I don't think it's about Man Island. I think it's about people. And I'd ask you, Eleanor, what is culture? I think culture is what people make of it. And I think, you know, in local, in the local environment, in their local marketplaces, doing relevant and interesting things, architects out there right now are doing all kinds of brilliant and innovative cultural innovations. And I think what we should be doing as an organization is promoting them and that. I hear a lot about the collection. I was told when I became a councillor that you know, it was the reason why we were never going to go bust, and nobody asked the question on that occasion, how would we ever sell the Leonardos, because you clearly can't. So, I mean, here we are, one word, people.
In terms of how to promote architecture and architects, I think, to me, it is about evidence. It's about actually communicating the value to government and to clients as to what it would be to actually engage with architecture. Until we do that, we will be seen as wallpaper, as optional, and actually if we can find a way of evidencing the impact that we have economically, socially, then that's when people get more interested. And in terms of the premises, I think it was it last Tuesday night or whatever, where we had the community event, the place was hiving and buzzing and so on. That's what 66 should be. I'm of a generation where we used to have the Young Lions lecture series and so on, and those people are now leading our profession, and that's what I see we should do.
Well, they always said at university that the architects gave the best parties, and I do think we should do that again, actually, and we've got some great venues for it.
We should be a sounding board for the profession. We should use all the venues we have, but we should also be a sounding board for diverse opinion within the profession, and in that way stimulate connection with both members and the public alike. We should use our collections as a way of also engaging, but they can be static. I would say that what we need is a dynamic connection with our public and our members, and yes, we do need quantifiable evidence of value to push to the government and to authorities and to the client base.
Right. Oh, Mr. Brindley, not another question. You've had about 40 years of this, mate. Go on.
Richard Brindley, RIBA member. Just, right. Quick question, quick answer, please. At the end of your 2 years presidency, what do you see as being your main achievement, and how would you be like to be remembered?
Increasing connection digitally and in every way to become for the Institute to be more of a sounding board for diverse opinion, to get it alive again, rather than just in dead committees or in quiet committees.
Very, very quickly, I would say that we want the membership numbers up and we want the average age down.
Well, I agree with both of my competitors on that. Saves me a bit of time and trouble answering the question. I don't actually think it's down to one president, one term or one person at all. I think it's part of a continuum, Richard, as I'm sure you agree. But the one little thing, which is actually not so little, that I'd like to see in place at the end of my presidency is the use of post-occupancy evaluation as part of the plan of work happening routinely as the beginning of our efforts to use research to build a body of knowledge in the profession.
Hey, I'm Marie Braithwaite, student member of council. Two-part education-related question. What would you say to students who are considering or currently studying architecture, but are tempted by a more profitable profession facing less internal challenges? Would you encourage them to continue, and why? And you spoke, Alan, about Brexit allowing us to focus on education that we think British students should be receiving, but how will you ensure that they receive a world-class education that prepares them for practice in a global industry and not becoming too insular, as the IBA is all too often accused of being?
Right, to me first of all? Yeah. Why would you continue to study architecture? My point would be, yes, well, it's always with any job, any role in life, it's a balance between the money and the motivation and what you get out of it. I mentioned earlier my wife's a dentist, so that yes, they earn more, but actually they stay in the same room all day long, and they hardly get out. Yeah, while yes. Would you prefer to be a dentist or an architect? Would you prefer to be a chiropodist or a solicitor or whatever? That actually, in terms of what we do, it is, I think it is very exciting. It allows for, my role model project shows the various things that you can do with an architectural education, and you can actually steer how you work, and even before you even finish, how you can study. But once you work, where you can end up. So that would be it. And then in terms of world class, well, I didn't say that we should become, well, I didn't imply that we become insular. I think it gives us the freedom to do exactly what you were talking about.
I have to say, I think it's a great profession. I think the course is a fantastic one. I think design education gives you a number of methods of problem solving. You become a problem solver. You become enhances your capability for a broader, enhance your imagination. It makes you think outside the box. It allows you to do a lot of things. There are a lot of people on the board who went into other areas. We are an imaginative group. It helps to be a professional group. We are careful about what we do, how we do things. We're a regulated profession, so we have a skill set that is very serious. We are, if you like, across the board from the arts to the sciences in terms of what we cover. And we are a delightful group. If you meet architects generally, they think in a different way to the rest of the people. And I have to say, I always think that I'd rather be with a group of architects than the general public generally.
I think young people are looking for social purpose in what they do in their lives and the way they earn a living. And I think the profession of architecture is brilliantly placed to deliver to people a lifelong reward, delivering through their creative efforts, through design, social purpose. And from that standpoint, I think it's extremely hard to beat in other professions and in other pursuits. As to world classness, well, I think we've got to work on that really hard. And the reason I'm sitting here and I'm trying to do this is because if we're to avoid going on the slide and becoming the opposite, I think we've got to seriously organize ourselves in order to provide the continuous improvement through our lives as individual professionals, and in order to coordinate a collaborative effort of assembling a body of knowledge that is more meaningful to our clients and to society than at the moment. And I think that is the central job of work to be done. And like I said in answer to Richard's question, I don't think it's for any of us as individuals to do that. I think it's a task of leadership in the profession, in the institute, and in the building industry generally, in order to create that sense of direction.
Well, they all love architecture and they all think it's a great profession, so I don't think there's any dividing thing there. So no extra points for any of them. Right, who else? Peter. Is it going to be quick, Peter? Because I'm getting a lot of pressure.
Central to your presidency will be the recently announced RIBA strategy, the opening statement of which is a global professional membership body advancing excellence in architecture. What does that mean to you, and how would you build on the current momentum to make sure we achieve it?
To me, I've always felt that we should be the default institute for the world of architecture, and that we would, for those who have institutes, that we should support them. And I'd be quite happy to be if they have their first set of initials as AIA, that the RIBA are their second set of initials. I would see that we should be cooperating and collaborating with other institutes around the world and supporting and infilling and broadening our approach and reaching out to the whole of the world. So all these areas, and we do it by being relevant, and all the things that we do here, that we spread the word by all technological means to make sure that we engage around the world.
I think we have a difficulty in the title of our organisation. It's called the Royal Institute of British Architects. And that would suggest that we should be promoting British architecture and British architects, which I think is not correct. I think we should be thinking of it as an institution that is promoting the best of architecture everywhere. And we should be increasing the representation of our international chapters on council. I think that's a definite. That was discussed at the council yesterday. Supporting the networks, that's in my election statement, and we need to find role models, for showing that how we can have practitioners doing different sorts of work, whether it's building schools in Middle Africa, whether it's high-rise in the Far East, and so on. And again, you look at a practice like, for example, Broadway Malyon, where it has moved from being a small organisation working in the UK, it is now in something like 16 different locations and so on. And what's amazing about that organisation, for example, 75% repeat business. So again, we have organisations that are started in this country and are worldwide, and if we're looking for members and engagement, we need to celebrate that.
I think I've made it clear that my proposition is like a hub, and at the ends of the spokes are places where local architects, local others, local collaborators are working together in networks. I personally find it a very exciting idea that the job of the Institute is to be, we can't change the name from RIBA because that's the brand, but the job of the Institute is to draw down the length of those spokes, the opportunity for people to meet with each other centrally, and then for us to promote it not only back to where they are active in their local networks, but to the other ends of the spoke. So a rather clumsily described proposition, but a hub, which is at the center of a global series of local networks doing really interesting things that are relevant to their marketplace, but have common themes that we can discuss and enjoy at the Institute here in London.
Right, the very last question, and it needs to be quick. Is it just Walter? I'm sorry, you've already had one. You can't ask another one.
Hello, my name is Walter Menteith. My question is a bit similar to Peter's. In the RIBA's document published today, it says we will put ethics at the heart of the profession. I'd like to ask you all three what you think that means and how you think it should be brought forward and put into the heart of the profession.
Alan, as you have a microphone.
Okay. Well, where I would start with is the Thomas Fisher book, which I put out in my presentation, is scenario-based, where it actually talks about 40 different potential issues. I raised this at the issue of being ethical at the conference for heads of schools of architecture, and somebody said, well, is there such a thing as being unethical, you know, as an architect? And it's so to me, what it would be is actually taking the code of conduct and actually putting another layer over it to actually sort of talk about what standards are. Is it ethical, for example, when you look at our cities, you go north, for example, and you start to find the most awful buildings that you could argue that an architect has been involved with? Is that ethical? And so on. So we need to sort of explore what it means, and I think to actually then sort of tease out within the code of conduct what that means would be my way.
Yes, ethical professionalism I think is incredibly important. It's central. I think it's not to be confused with politics, because I think we as architects are represented right across the political spectrum. So for me, it's about our ability to communicate to clients and our society those things which we are trained to get them to understand are the implications of their decision making. So I think that's about sustainability. I think it's about, in all senses of the word, by the way, social, economic and environmental sustainability. So I think we have to convey to our clients the implications of what they're doing there. Moreover, I think as practices, we should set out in what we do what our ethical code is. I think we should make it plain on our websites and in our literature what we believe in. I think that's important. And I think a way of doing that would be probably by using chartered practice to raise the level of ethical commitment in architects, and by the way, in others too. I think we should do this collaboratively, and we should share it across the building industry. But I think at the highest level, I think practice should commit to teach. I think they should commit to research. I think they should commit to predicting the performance of their buildings, and I think they should commit to measuring that performance post-occupancy when the building is finished. And by those means, I think we become a profession that asserts that it is competent and able to advise our clients and society in an appropriate way on a technical footing about what is the right decision to make when investing in the built environment.
It is about sustainability. It is also about value and values, but we should be talking about value rather than cost. That it is about what the overall lifetime return is on the building in all dimensions, social as well as economic, and that we should be the profession that strives to talk about real value at the end of the project, and the end of the lifetime of the building, rather than just bottom line cost. And that also goes for fees. You only get what you pay for, but you should be striving for value rather than just the lowest common denominator.
Okay, thank you very much. Can we just have a big hand for the three candidates? And nice to see some very measured answers there. And I'm not sure they really think that, but no, I thought they were very measured. And the best of luck. Just so you know, I think it's the 5th of July to the 8th of August, I think. So, yeah, it's going to run and run, this one. But, yeah, okay, good luck.
Lovely to see you out.